Today on Trucks, Stacey and I finished transforming Chevy's Xtreme S10 into a muscle-bound sport truck. We'll lay on the stripes, then melt off the rubber on our Xtreme pickup. After that, we'll show you how to build a ramp that'll help grade your vehicle's off-road capability. Then we'll hit the trail to show you how to get the most out of your experience behind the wheel. That's all coming up today on Trucks.
Hello everybody, and thanks for dropping into the shop. If you've been around the last couple weeks, then you've seen our Xtreme S10 go through quite a transformation.
But if you've missed the last couple of shows, we need to bring you up to speed with Project LT Xtreme. The first thing we did was tear out the stock 4-banger to make room for the donor LT1 with a 700 R4 automatic tranny. Of course, that's controlled with B&M's hammer shifter. VDO gauges and a custom panel monitor the heartbeat of our Xtreme.
To handle the weight and get a better grip, we upgraded our front suspension with Eibach springs and Edelbrock shocks. Dual Spall fans and a Griffin radiator will keep things cool, while a new fuel pump and pickup assembly found a home in the gas tank. Finally, we finished up last week by strapping on a custom drive shaft from wheel to wheel. Now, I've already made all the electrical connections and dropped in the battery. I also hooked up the heater hoses, but I'm going to wait to put the antifreeze in until we make sure this bad boy's got its rumble.
Now, while Mel was doing that, I hooked up the throttle cables and the fuel lines and topped everything off with this custom set of Moroso valve covers. Now comes the moment of truth. We're going to put fire to this thing to check our clearances and make sure everything's ready to go. Not to mention, we're dying to hear what this thing sounds like with open headers.
Oh man, that sucker sounds healthy,
This
buddy.
thing rocks!
Now, of course, a performance motor is useless without a performance exhaust, so we're going to go with a complete Flowmaster system that connects both headers together and flows through one 3-inch pipe. Flowmaster's real claim to fame is the muffler because it uses a series of chambers instead of baffles to help reduce back pressure without breaking your eardrums or the law.
Speaking of breaking the law, that is exactly what you'll do if you try to run without a catalytic converter on anything less than 25 years old. Now, catalytic converters have crashed the party for hot rodders for years because you had high flowing headers, a great flowing exhaust, and then you had to choke it right back down with a restrictive cat. But Random Technologies has the answer with their high flow converters that still control emissions but are far less restrictive, breathe a new life back into the party.
Our stock rear end has a posi in it, and Wheel to Wheel says the axles are going to be strong enough to handle that donor LT1. We'll find out when we drop the hammer on our Xtreme later in the show. One thing's for sure though, we are going to have severe wheel hop problems thanks to all that newfound torque. We're going to counter that problem with Lakewood's traction bars built specifically for S10s. The design's been around forever because it works, and Stacey's going to show you how.
Spring wrap is what causes wheel hop. Now, what happens when you stomp on the gas, this rear end housing wants to rotate upwards. That takes this nice U-shaped leaf spring and tries to turn it into an S shape by causing it to buckle here. Now, that in turn makes this tire lose contact with the road, and this spring, being a spring, shoves it back to its original position. So you've got this constant back and forth motion, which is wheel hop. And that can also cause broken springs, shackles, axles, and a whole lot of bad performance.
These new bars are going to replace the rear shackle plates here, so the first thing we need to do is pull the stock shocks, as well as the 4 nuts on the U-bolts. Lakewood's hardware slides right into place. You may have to remove this overload leaf in some applications. We're going to be all right here. We're going to loosely mount the U-bolt to the spring because we'll have to make the final adjustments with the truck on the ground. Now we can show you how these things really work. When the torque's applied to the axle and it twists up, like Stace was telling you earlier, the bump stop here hits the frame and the bar keeps the spring from flexing, eliminating your wheel hop problem and giving you the performance you're after.
Since we have the shocks off, we're going to go ahead and upgrade them with the same Edelbrock Performer shocks that we used on the front. Not only do they perform better, but heck, you got to match.
Once you've got your truck on the ground, you need to cut the bump stop with a hacksaw to get the proper height. For a racing setup, you want it to lightly touch the frame for better traction. For running the streets, you need to leave about a ½ inch to give your suspension room to work.
Now the U-bolt's important because it keeps your traction bar from rotating downwards and possibly hitting the pavement when you hit your brakes. Adjust your jam nut to where you have about a ¼ inch gap between the top of your spring and the U-bolt.
Well, Project LT Xtreme's all buttoned up underneath. After the break, we're going to put the finishing touches on it before we roast the meats off it. Don't go away. We'll be right back.
Later on Trucks, we'll show you how to build an articulation ramp that'll help you get the most out of your off-road vehicle. But up first, the donor LT1 is stuffed under the hood. All we have to do now is lay down some stripes before we can lay down some rubber with our Xtreme Sport Truck.
Welcome back to the show, everybody. I know it's just about killing you to see this thing roll down the street.
Not as bad as it's killing us.
Well, that's for sure, but it's important to remember anytime you do a major project like our donor swap here, you need to check all the fluids as well as your wire connections.
Believe me, nothing will ruin your day like a lot of horsepower and no brakes, or a fire under the hood due to bad wiring or a bad fuel connection.
You know, the worst thing for the performance of the fuel injection is a big old gulp of hot air from the radiator. So the kit from Wheel to Wheel comes with a custom-made extension tube and elbow to help redirect the intake to cooler air.
Of course, the Xtreme Aero package just wouldn't be complete without a cool hood, as in cowl induction. A&A Fiberglass made the molds for this, but you can buy it at your local Chevy dealer.
A big mistake people make when using fiberglass parts is they paint them before making sure they fit right. And trust us, there's always some tweaking you got to do, so check the fit before you paint it.
Stripes have gotten really hot again over the last few years, so Wheel to Wheel decided to take a page out of the Camaro's heritage and design some rally sport style stripes exclusively for this kit.
If you've never put on vinyl graphics before, we're going to show you a few tricks to help make the installation a little bit easier. The most important of which is a clean surface. Use a high quality cleaner that removes wax and grease to ensure the best stick.
Now, since these stripes are going to be centered on the hood, we need to find the true center line so we don't end up going crooked. Now, whatever you do, don't trust the factory seam line of the hood. Always use a tape measure.
Now you can mock up your stripes to the center line to get an idea where they're going to lay. This way, when the backing's off, you have a general idea where to go. These are going to look pretty cool, aren't they, Stace?
And they are. Now, the most important step is to take a solution of soapy water and soak the hood, and I mean coat it. This will give you an opportunity to move the stripes around before they stick permanently.
Now comes the easy part. Just line up your marks. We like to leave about a ½ inch at the top to curl under the hood for a nice finished look. Once you have it where you want it, slowly press down, starting from the middle and moving outward with a squeegee. When you see bubbles, just take your time and slowly work them out. Since we're going with the cowl induction hood, we need to modify the stripes that come with the Wheel to Wheel kit. We narrowed ours to fit the hood scoop, which means we'll have to do the ¼ inch stripes by hand. Pull the protective covering back at a sharp angle to avoid raising the stripe, and the hood's finished.
We need to narrow our roof stripes to 8 inches to match the hood. Now, these stripes are for an extended cab pickup, so we're going to have to shorten them as well. Now, make sure of your measurements, because if you cut them too short, you might as well just chuck them in the trash.
For a real clean look, we're going to run our stripes through the brake light pocket, so we need to get this lens out of the way. Then we can douse the roof with that soap and water solution.
You about ready for these graphics, Mel?
We're ready to do it.
All right. These are going to look really good.
I think the narrower stripe's much better, actually.
All right, a little closer, more to the right, right there, right there. Now, even though we marked a center line on the center of the roof, it's a good idea to step back and eyeball everything to make sure it's lining up right. Mel, that's perfect, man.
After your stripes have been smoothed out and worked into place, take a razor blade and cut off the excess at the window rubber.
While Mel finishes up the roof, I'm going to go ahead and put on this window graphic. Now, compared to the stripes, this is a piece of cake. Just make sure you get it centered.
Hey, Stace, you about finished up back there?
Yeah, we got stripes on our truck. Let's go see if we can lay some on the road. Some rubber ones.
Let's do it, man. With a stock 4-banger in the Xtreme, all we could do is dream about burnouts. With our donor LT1 that pumps out more than 320 horse, it's a smoking reality.
Surprisingly, the added nose weight from our V8 didn't hurt us through the corners either, thanks to our shock and spring upgrade. And the Xtreme Aero package and unique striping definitely makes a statement.
But not near the statement we'll send to those unsuspecting Vets, Camaros, and Mustangs when we chase them down. Don't go away. We got more trucks for you right after the break.
Later in the show, we'll take Big Orange out for a thrashing and show you how to get the most out of your driving ability when you hit the trail. But up first, we'll show you how to grade your vehicle's ability off-road with an articulation ramp.
Welcome back to the shop. If you're into off-roading, you've at least heard about articulation ramps and the term RTI. But if you haven't, you probably do know more suspension movement usually means a better performing vehicle off-road.
But with any kind of suspension mods, whether it be a lift or just bigger tires, there's always going to be questions like, did I go too high? Or, oh, I could have gone higher. Fortunately, an articulation ramp can answer all those questions.
But before we build our ramp for the truck shop, we need to clarify articulation, which is basically how much your suspension can flex with all 4 wheels still on the ground.
For our ramp, we're going to use 2x2 square tubing for strength. Now, the only requirement is your ramp needs to be longer than your longest wheelbase vehicle. So we're going to make ours 13 feet long and 16 inches wide. That'll be plenty.
While Stace is busy laying out the side rails, I'm going to go ahead and cut our cross members with a plasma cutter. How far apart are we setting these, Stace?
I've got them marked at 2 feet apart for extra strength.
Cool. It's a good idea to tack each piece in place so they don't move on you before you run a full seam.
Now the ramp needs to sit at a 20-degree incline for standard testing. We'll use an angle gauge to make sure that measurement's accurate. We're right on. Next, measure and cut your rear supports as well as your lower cross members and rails before you weld them on.
Of course, we need to have some support to keep this thing from tipping over, so we're going to put a 3-foot outrigger at the end and a 2-foot piece in the center. Don't forget to support them.
The last thing we need to do is weld some expanded metal onto the face of the ramp to give us traction. It also ties everything together.
The reason for the ramp is to get accurate comparisons between vehicles with different wheelbases. Now, if Stace can just keep it on the ramp, as soon as any of the tires lift off the ground or rub a fender, measure in inches from the base of the ramp to the center of the wheel on the ramp. Divide this number by the wheelbase and multiply it by 1,000 to get your ramp travel index, or RTI.
With 1,000 being a perfect score, a 921 is smoking for a Wrangler with a 4-inch lift.
You know, it really is, and the best part is it only costs us about $200 to build the ramp. Don't go away, we got more trucks for you right after the break.
Up next on Trucks, Stace has this week's quick tip for you, and we'll take you for a ride in Big Orange to show you how to get the most out of your experience behind the wheel.
Welcome back. You know, Stace and I have been off-roading a lot of different vehicles, and as everyone knows, no two trails are alike. But there are some basic driving skills that'll save your equipment and pull you out of some pretty hairy situations.
The most important thing is knowing your vehicle. Now, that includes approach and departure angles so you don't tear off your bumper on a steep incline, where your differential pumpkins are so you don't split them open on a rock, and how much tire clearance you have to prevent body damage. Knowing these things will help you develop the ability good drivers possess.
Now, when crawling rocks, the bash and crash approach only destroys your vehicle and your pride. Granted, sometimes you get lucky, but slow and easy is the key.
It's also important to take the time to pick your way through the obstacles. Get out and walk the trail if necessary to plan your line. And make sure each move sets you up for the next maneuver so you don't get hung up. But remember, things rarely go as planned, so give yourself some options before you end up hanging off the side of the hill.
Of course, not everyone's going to go rock climbing. Some of you like to get down and dirty, and so do we. But this takes a whole different approach. Running mud or sand requires momentum, gnarly tires, and enough tire spin to clean the tread. This can be tricky. Not enough throttle will bog you down. Too much can mean second place and destroyed equipment.
Now that's just a few basic tips, and we'll show you some more in the weeks to come. But remember, no tip in the world's going to do you any good without a little common sense. How many times have you been working on something and had a part fall down into a place you couldn't get to? Oh, you know the feeling. Not to mention the hours you'll spend trying to retrieve it. Well, here's a tip that really sucks. Now, I mean that literally. Just take a standard shop vac, take the leg of a pair of pantyhose and stretch it over the nozzle, hit the switch, and your troubles are over. This works really great on plastic parts a magnet won't grab. The shop vac you can pick up at any hardware store. The pantyhose? Well, you're on your own for that. Stay with us. We got truck gear coming at you right after the break.
And now truck gear, parts, tools, and equipment for pickups and sport utilities.
If you're tired of the cargo in the back of your truck or SUV giving you the slip, this cargo bar by Save-A-Load is worth its weight in gold. And since it's made of aircraft aluminum, it won't rust or corrode either. It's width adjustable to fit any compact or full-size vehicle and has a bending strength of more than 700 pounds. The easy pump handle and quick release push button make it safe to use as well. Keep the cargo right where you want it with a Save-A-Load for about $70.
Now, for those of you truck guys that are running a high RPM motor and a standard shift transmission, this blow-proof bell housing from Lakewood is cheap insurance should you grenade a clutch. It's made out of high tensile steel and offers a full 360 degrees of protection by retaining the shrapnel of a blown clutch. Now, these things only cost about $250 and are available for most Ford, Chrysler, and Chevy applications. That's going to do it for truck gear. Let's see what we have for you next week on Trucks.
Stace and I take a Jeep Scrambler and get it ready for the trail by bolting on a hydraulic winch and power steering box. Then we'll take a trip to Reno, Nevada, where 16-time Baja 1000 champion Rod Hall teaches desert racing skills in a Hummer. After that, it's back to the shop for some buffing tips that'll give you professional results without the cost. That's all next week on Trucks.
Well, that's going to do it for this week's show. Hey, Stace, you got anything you want to say?
How about just goodbye?
Goodbye.
Yeah, goodbye.
Just straight goodbye.
Yeah, just tell them goodbye.
All right. Goodbye.
Well, now you told them about next week's show.
Well, you said you just wanted to say goodbye.
What do you think this is, Jeopardy? You got to tell them something.
You tell them. Go ahead, this is your big chin.
See us next week. There, are you happy, Dale?
Yeah, that's perfect.
Trucks is an RTM production.